Hi, I'm Robert Priest at Art Design Cafe. This continues the brief regarding the Duke of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha and Emily Hall Tremaine, the event at her villa in April 1940. Uh, all right. So, just to highlight a couple of things before I get into more. So, Emily from 1935 seems to have these very strong anti-Nazi creds. Her best friend is Elsa, who I've discussed earlier. And what I'm going to do is go through some clippings about this trip and then afterward go right into Emily's secret deposition. So, just as a recap, the Duke has traveled from Germany through Russia to Japan. Then he gets to San Francisco. He goes to the East Coast. Then he goes back to Los Angeles and San Francisco, I recall, um, and goes back to Japan via Manchuria. And so he there's interest in that, the Germany Japan element for it. I don't recall exactly where I saw this, whether this was with Rogie, John Rogie's report, or via some declassified information from U.S. Intel. Uh, but I'll try to, for the next segment, if you will, I'll try to find that source specifically. But basically, this was, as I understand it, a plot against socialites and businessmen for appeasement sentiment towards Germany through the higher in society and of influence. And this Duke is Queen Victoria's grandson. Then he's also the head of the German Red Cross, and then he's an ally to Hitler. So it's sort of mixed messaging, if you will, to an audience that doesn't really know about him for that. And you see that, and it ends up in Emily's secret deposition, but you see that in the news reporting. Sometimes they don't even, they kind of run with Queen Victoria's grandson, the British royal aspect, and then others go after the Hitler elements, and I'm going to show you that right now. So I'm going to go dive right into some of the reporting, and there is a lot about his trip reported in various cities, and you need to look in ProQuest, the paid online databases, and also Newsbank for that, because these papers across the U.S., they're all in different pockets, and not all are digitized. So I'm going to go to the Cleveland Plain Dealer, 21 March 1940. Title, German Red Cross Chief to Stop Here. The president of the German Red Cross, Karl Edward, Duke of Saxe-Coburg Gotha, will stop off in Cleveland Saturday on his way to the West Coast. The Duke, who was received at Washington by President Roosevelt, has completed a conference with Norman Davis, chairman of the American Red Cross. Okay, and then it goes further on. So, that's very mixed messaging. He has seen Roosevelt, which sounds fine, if you will, but he's traveling around the country. And then I'm going to read the last part to it, last paragraph. Duke Karl Edward lost his dukedom after the World War and promptly identified himself with the movement led by Hitler. His relations with the Fuhrer date from 1922 until 1933. The Duke worked to unite the various nationalist groups under Hitler, and for his services was appointed to a number of honorary positions. All right. So this article actually goes into that, where others do not. Now we're looking at March 24th, 1940, Cleveland Plain Dealer. Title, Holds War Hasn't Split. That's a strange title. Holds War Hasn't Split Red Cross. Subtitle, German leader here says harmony rules relief. Now, just to give you a context here, let's see. Okay, this is interesting. Before the interview was granted, a member of the Duke's staff, Dr. Wilhelm Tannenberg, first secretary of the German embassy in Washington, made it plain that the Duke wished to answer no questions dealing with the conduct of the war or with the state of public opinion in the United States. He asked that questions be confined to the subject of the Duke's American mission or to Red Cross matters. All right? That's part of their communication strategy. And then also, besides members of the German consular staff, consular representatives of Romania, Yugoslavia, Hungary, Italy, and Latvia were present at the luncheon. Among other guests were Charles H. Kelstad, president of the Greater Cleveland Red Cross chapter, Mrs. Maud B. McQuaid, leader in the Red Cross roll call, and Mayor Harold H. Burton. So, as you can, and then he is, afterwards, they went to Wycliffe for a dinner and a reception in the home of Mrs. Lawrence Lanier Winslow. They will leave this morning for Detroit. So he's integrated, if you will, to some degree into society. And the luncheon was given in his honor at Hotel Cleveland by the German Consulate. All right, so posh hotel, mayor, and all of this. So this is important when assessing the situation with Emily, but not making excuses. When it drops that Emily hosted the Duke, and by the way, after the war, the Duke was associated with the policy to exterminate the mentally ill and physically disabled, that's shocking. And it is shocking. But this is also what is going on, and not as an excuse, if you will, but the mayor met him. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. Now I'm going to go on to he moves on to Los Angeles. So now there's an event at the Beverly Hills Hotel. Again, posh hotels. And in the next section, what I aim to do is go through an overview of this trip to highlight that across America. I don't think anyone has, well, it's in newspapers, but anyone has written history about his trip through society for that. There is a book which has a brilliant chapter in a book called Go-Betweens that talks about the Duke. He was a go-between between Hitler and the British, the Duke, and but it doesn't get into this American trip, limited context and space and resources, etc. So this trip is, as I understand it, not really known in American history, and it raises a lot of questions about what was happening. So now the Beverly Hills Citizen on April 12th, 1940. So again, how are they doing it? So royal guest entertained here Friday. Reception is given to large group at local hotel. Now let me look through this here. All right. So, remember, we're listening for, are they mentioning Nazi for that? So reading the first paragraph. With something like 350 guests, among them prominent civic and social leaders of metropolitan Los Angeles, attending a reception was given Friday afternoon in the terrace room of the Beverly Hills Hotel by Dr. Georg Gissling, German Consul, to honor His Royal Highness Karl Edward, Duke of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, who was visiting here for a short time while en route to Germany by way of the Orient. The Duke had come to America to confer with Norman Davis, head of the American Red Cross. That's it. No mention of Hitler or Nazi for that. And then the last paragraph, the royal visitor to California was a kindly, interesting person. He is the grandson of Queen Victoria and is related to most of Europe's royal families. So think about that. I mean, that's quite a telling half of the story, if you will. Now I'm going to switch over, and this is in April 13th, 1940, page 5, part 2, Los Angeles Times, sort of a column by Alma Whitaker. All right, quote here. Someone's asking her a question. She writes a column. Is it true that you attended the party given by the German Consul for the Duke of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha? I cannot believe that you, an Englishwoman, would bring yourself to do that, writes Alyssa B. Yes, Alyssa, I did, and enjoyed it. You see, the Duke is Queen Victoria's grandson, looks a good deal like his uncle, King Edward VII, and is a likable old dear, at present evidently suffering from considerable in-law trouble. I also like the German consul, whose position is not exactly enviable these days. Also, I'm more American than English now. California is my home. My husband and son's American. And as I did in the last war, I'm going to avoid international and individual hates as long as I can. The war will get to Los Angeles soon enough without me helping to hasten it along. And that, Alyssa, goes for you too. So she scolds her the letter writer, and we see how history turned out. But notice here, she's not going into Nazi. And then the last sample here, and this is from April 14th, 1940, page 3, part 4. So this is after, the events in Montecito with Emily. And this is, I recall only seeing a couple of very brief mentions of this, which tells me that Emily's not promoting it, for that. Because, we know that she can generate press, and yet this is she's not pushing this. All right. So I'll read off the beginning to give a sense. The Blair Fosters of Hillsborough, that's San Francisco area, Sheldon Coopers of San Francisco, and Wellington Hendersons report that great to-do is going on in the Bay City over the Duke of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha. Well, they'll have to go some to top his visit here. This delightful visitor, whose sister is Canada's new First Lady, Princess Alice of Albany, Athlone, I guess, motored to Santa Barbara in democratic fashion last week in an open car with old friends Hans Wolfram and Baron Paul von Gontard. Going further on. Okay. Highlights of his visit. The show Meet the People, which he loved. The Bel Air Garden Show, which he saw under the guidance of Mrs. Jane Ahern, Mrs. Roy Van Wart and Marion Gross, a barbecue at Amy and Frank Powell's Comancias Ranch in Hidden Valley, a dinner dance by big game hunter and explorer Paul von Gontard, a cocktail party in Montecito by the Adolph Spreckels, and then in parentheses Emily von Romberg. All right. So there it's noted for that. So that's the, now I'm going to move on to the deposition. All right, so I'm going to be reading through it, so it'll probably be easier if you read along, if you will. I'm going to be speaking it. And that's on the Artisan Cafe website. If you go to the Emily page, scroll down, it's about the filing for divorce. That page, and it's called the PDF is called J, and I'm looking at page 37, so you might want to pause it and get that here. Some things about the deposition. There is one page missing from it, and the archivist said that was strange, but it's over 80 years old. It said, the one page that's missing is interesting because this happens before she talks about his physical attack or alleged physical attack in the Hotel del Coronado in San Diego. And, so my question is, well, did she see something with that? The deposition is a bit odd because if you think of the context, if the European War has begun, or for this by the time of the deposition, which is October 1940, and if she's wrapped up in intelligence, can she say things, or does she not want to say things for that? The easiest way would have been is that all of this, whatever it was, came out then. And so imagine that there was a letter, from Ellis Zacharias in this file that says A, B, C, and D, for that, but there's not. So there's that. And I think the only way to really get to the bottom of this is that there's got to be full up to three country, depending on the person, intelligence, declassified intelligence, from the Duke to more out of Gissling, his recorded stuff in Berlin, but then I recall that he burned a bunch of documents, as well as going into the organization of Office of Naval Intelligence for that. So one of the key questions in this event is, one of the problems I have is, it's history. You're limited with what people are telling you versus people answering your questions, directly. So what I want to know is, where were all the players, that are clearly around this history? Where are they during this event, and what are they doing, and maybe what are they thinking? So that includes her mother, her sister Jane, her brother-in-law Jay Bennett, who's connected to the Navy/Naval Intelligence. Zacharias, what did he know? Because this is a very interesting event for him, with the Japan connection, which I'll explain in a minute. And where is Elsa? And where's Philip? And where are her new Jewish where's her new Jewish friend Leo Vandenberg, who, among other things, is probably fluent in German, and his Swedish wife, who probably is fluent in German. These people are all kind of gathering after all this, with Zacharias and his wife, and it just has the feel that, if they're aligned, then how earlier on were they aligned? And also, it's the nature of the eyes and ears intelligence, if you will, for that. Just passing things on, that you could be questioned and not even realize you're providing useful information. All right, so I'm on 37 of this deposition. I'm just going to read through it. After your marriage to Mr. Spreckels, you became acquainted with the German Consul in Los Angeles, did you not? Emily says, yes, I met him. Where did you first meet him? Scrolling down. Where did you first meet him? I met him at the home of a friend of mine. That is Dr. Gissling. That is, Dr. Gissling is the German Consul. Yes. And you met him first at the home of Mrs. Luddington. Is that correct? Witness shakes head in the negative. I am afraid the reporter did not get the answer. The answer was no. That's Mr. Ryan, her lawyer. So a couple of things here. Mrs. Luddington is the wife of one of the group of founders at the museum, the Santa Barbara Museum of Art. I don't know where they got that. But that's interesting, because clearly Adolph Spreckels, or that group, maybe suspected something or whatever. Mr. Ryan, Harrison Ryan is Emily's brilliant lawyer, who certainly looks like an anti-Nazi to me. And if you go through this deposition and the court record, he seems really clued up. I think the lawyer went back to her parents, if you will, and Mr. Ryan is part of the organization of the Santa Barbara Museum of Art. Going further, question by Mr. Rogers, presumably the lawyers of Adolph in this deposition. At whose home? Answer, Emily. I would rather not say. May I ask you to state the name? And then Emily answers, is it all right if I state it? Mr. Ryan says yes. So to me, there's something going on there. Why is she hesitant on saying this in this context of in this context with possible spying and everything else for that. And the answer by Emily is Mrs. Philip Chancellor. So that's Elsa for that. So that's very interesting. All right, and then the lawyer says, when was that? I think it must have been about March 1940. It was in the spring. March of what year? 1940. 1940, that is this past March. You met him for the first time. Yes. Now that to me is a little surprising. She may be parsing words here because I'd have to check, but I recall seeing her name once or twice in an event for the Los Angeles, the German Consul to Los Angeles, some sort of large gathering, but maybe they didn't go. Things can be reported and not necessarily happen in the if it's who will be there and then someone doesn't show up, and maybe around the visiting Cram, the tennis player who visited and then got thrown in jail for that, who her kind of friend among she's a socialite, a very busy socialite, and she knows tons of people, but she was friendly a bit with Barbara Hutton, and Barbara Hutton, that was her later husband for that. So anyway, she may be parsing words on that for that. So did you have any discussion with him at that time? Any conversation with him, Kisling? Naturally, I had lunch with him and talked to him. Now that's interesting because it sounds like she likes him, if you will. So before 2017, when it became known that Gisling was to some degree a double agent for U.S. military and an anti-Nazi, before 2017, this would look really dodgy, for Emily, if you will. And now it kind of makes sense, if you will, just from what we know about her, how she seems to be. Continuing, yes, at that time it was suggested that the Duke, I won't guarantee the pronunciation of this, I may have the same difficulty that you had, the Duke of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, be entertained. That was suggested before I met Dr. Gisling. That was suggested before you met him? Yes. When you met him at this luncheon, however, the arrangements for that and for your entertaining the Duke were gone over and arranged. Isn't that correct? Yes. And you invited the Duke and his entourage to be your guests at your home. Is that not correct? Will you speak so the reporter can get your answers? All right, I'm going through this. Are you to be guests at your home? Yes, they were. Yeah, and she answers yes. Who is the Duke of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha? He is the grandson of Queen Victoria and educated at Oxford and Cambridge. And at the present time, and in fact, I found out after I agreed to entertain him, he was the president of the German Red Cross. Question. In fact, you knew that he was at the time a German when you discussed the matter before, did you not? Emily, answer. Not when I was first asked to entertain him. I did not. I was called up and asked whether I would entertain the grandson of Queen Victoria, the Duke of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, and I said I'd be very happy to. And sometime after that, maybe a day or two after I had said that I would, I picked up a paper and saw that he was president of the German Red Cross. And at that time, I asked Mrs. Chancellor, who had asked me to entertain him, whether he was over here for the German Red Cross, because I said I did not want any speeches or any soliciting in my home. And she says, no, it was a completely unofficial visit, and that he was on his way to the coronation in Manchuria. And having committed myself, I went through with it. Okay, now let's pause here. A couple of facts. Why is Elsa Chancellor pushing this? Well, we know she got her mother and her cousin out of Germany, and so she may be involved in that kind of thing. We also know that there was a news report that Philip and Elsa were planning to go to the coronation in 37 or 38. I think it was 37 or 38, and they were going to take the Hindenburg. And actually, if you know about the Hindenburg, in relation to the coronation, I recall that the Hindenburg was going from Europe to the New York area, and that's when it exploded or blew up or whatever. And so it never picked up the people going to the coronation. So I don't know if Elsa and Philip actually got there or anything else. So that would be a royal connection for that. And I think that you'd have to check if the Duke of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha went to that coronation for that. All right. And so moving forward, question. And you knew also at the time you arranged for this entertaining with Dr. Gisling that he was connected with the national movement in Germany, did you not? I found it out at the luncheon with Dr. Gisling, which was much too late to do anything. All right, so let's kind of unpack this a little bit. You have a friend who asks you to entertain someone, and you find out in 3 layers he's a Royal German Red Cross, and then he's connected with the regime. So you might be a little annoyed at that. So I did see afterward that Emily is still socializing with Elsa. So I don't know. I don't know about that. I would be furious, but that's me. Thereafter, you entered into some correspondence with Dr. Gisling about the entertainment and who should be invited, did you not? Answer. I do not remember the details particularly, but Dr. Gisling said he would send me a list of the people who were expected to be entertained with the Duke's entourage, and I do not believe I wrote back to Dr. Gisling, but I may have, confirming they would be received when they came. All right, so here we see the guest list. This is really key, this guest list. Who was there for that? And then if it's a spying operation, that, how does that work? So I hope to get a copy of this guest list because through some intelligent source, because I think it will tell me something. Because tell me if Emily's family and friends are around this for that. The thing to keep in mind at this time, while it would be interesting to Zacharias and J. Bennett Noble, and even you could argue Jane Noble, her sister, who's we think a spy's wife, just by being married to him, and in that scene, is the Duke is going to Japan, and Zacharias is concerned at that time. Check that the actual dates on this, but he's received some sort of tip that the Japanese are looking for the ships. They want to know when all the ships are in the same place. So that's a preview to Pearl Harbor for that. So, and also I'm going to mention this house. All right, what's so interesting about this house? Well, if you go into Volker Welter's research book in Tremaine houses, he talks about that. Basically, it had secret rooms, and there was question because of it's unclear about Max giving mixed signals with his German nationality, but having only American money and apparently no assets in Germany, according to his will, is they could be used for hiding purposes. But that's so if you're kind of thinking, big Nazi agent kind of stuff, you could hide Nazis in there. But there's a history to him and his family, and also a context of security concerns. And that goes back to his family. There was an incident with his older stepbrother, and his mother was reported to be basically traumatized by it and moved to Europe afterwards. That was stated, at least. So there's a concern about kidnappings, and at that time for that. But also, one wonders if the structure of this, if these rooms are situated also with the technology available, if it's set up for spying. So that's a possibility there. Moving along. All right. Okay. All right, I may be repeating a section of it. So she answers, I do not remember the details particularly, but Dr. Gisling said he would send me a list of people. All right, I did say that. Moving on. Question, is it not a fact that you also wrote to Dr. Gisling confirming that and also told him that in the interim, since your conversation, you had arranged with other persons in Santa Barbara for the Duke and his entourage to see certain gardens and to be entertained in other homes? They asked me to do that, and I did it. You did that? Yes. All right. So basically, he's coming to Santa Barbara, and he had been there, I recall, in 1934. He did a trip maybe through Canada and down, and he was over there as well. So at the beginning of the Hitler regime. And he has a thing for gardens. And Montecito was famous at that time for garden tours. And a big place was her mother's house. So if this were a spy operation, that comes into play. I don't have a list of which gardens he visited, but that could be estimated just looking at when they had garden tours and where did they go, because it would be the finer gardens in Montecito and Santa Barbara for that. So continuing. Mrs. Spreckels, upon the leaving of the Duke and his entourage, I'm not going to pronounce the name. You know whom I mean. You invited him and his entourage to return to your home on their return from Honolulu, did you not? No, because I knew he was not returning. I knew he was going to Manchuria. Then your answer is that you did not invite him to return to your home. Yes. Did he at any subsequent time visit in your home? No. Let me just read something. When? Okay, here she may be parsing words. I haven't looked at this. I recall the first secretary, whoever was leading the unofficially for Nazi Germany in the U.S., did go through Los Angeles, and so yes, the Duke went on to Manchuria and Japan, but there was someone that came back. So that's something I don't really know about, or I haven't looked into yet. Continuing, when did you advise your husband that you were entertaining the Duke and his entourage? I did not advise him. I asked his permission. And that was after you made the arrangements, was it not? No. The arrangements had, I told him the chances are I would, subject to Adolph's approval. How many days after that conversation was it that you advised Mr. Spreckels that, subject to his approval, you were going to entertain the Duke and his entourage? You mean from the time I spoke to Mrs. Chancellor? Yes. Adolph was out of town. He was in Hot Springs, Arkansas, and the night that he returned from Hot Springs, we had a difference, and he did not know whether we were going on living together or not. And when we finally said that we would try again, I said that Elsa Chancellor had asked me to entertain the Duke, and I had told her that if everything was in order, that I would be happy to do it for her. The reason I said that to Mrs. Chancellor was I was not sure Adolph and I were going on together, and I knew if there were a separation that I in no way could entertain anybody. And then when we decided he was to come back and try again, I said, do you think it would be all right to do this favor for Elsa? And he said yes. He thought it would be a most interesting thing to do and to go on with it. So that's the excerpt from the deposition. So I don't think it gets us to the full answers of this mystery of what was going on there, what were the motivations, and who was there. But I think it helps move it along.